Welcome back to our Stygian interview series. Today I am joined by CM Lockhart, one of our amazing authors, and I'm really looking forward to chatting about creativity and whatever might come up. Let's just start with a little introduction. Tell us about yourself, the work you do, your YouTube channel, anything you'd like to share.
Okay, so hello, hi everyone. I am Chelsea. I go by CM Lockhart on books and on the interweb at large. And if you've seen me on TikTok, then you probably see me being like, "Hey, you guys, what's up?" If you've never seen me before, my name is Chelsea, and I write books about Black girls who aren't all that nice. And this is my book. Post-credit scenes. Have the book actually there. But um, I am an author. I write, generally speaking, fantasy stories, but for the Stygian Collection, we got a little on the darker side, and that was really fun. Um, so yeah, and I also have, of course, the YouTube channel where we talk about all things, Black and bookish over there. We have the Melanin Chat that is every other week. I am also the owner and founder of the Melanin Library, which is an online database of books written by Black authors. And yeah, that's kind of my whole shtick, my whole spiel. We're just over here writing and being creative and supporting everyone that we can. So yeah.
When I first found your channel, I was just really impressed by all of the other things you were doing as well, because I, of course, just launched into your social media, and I think that your endeavors are really cool. And as someone who's community focused, I just wanted to say, like big props to what you do for the communities around you. I think it's awesome.
Thank you. I appreciate it so much. It's you can probably attest to this, but it's work, getting a community together and keeping it together and not letting it fall apart or go silent. Yeah. But definitely worth the work in the long run, especially when you have people around you who show up for you and come through, and you can support each other. So it's not just, oh, I'm pushing my own books, but hi, here are these other people that I know who are doing the same or similar things, and check them out.
Yeah, exactly. It can be hard to keep that communication going. I mean, we were just talking before we started recording about keeping up on watching everyone's channels and stuff. Mm-hmm. So if you're spearheading something like that, it's just it's such a great thing to do, and it is fulfilling, but it is very hard work.
Yes, it is a full-time job for sure.
So amid all of this, what inspired you to contribute to the Stygian Collection?
Couple of things. One, it was kind of a challenge. A lot of 2023 for me has just been challenging myself to step outside of my box. Because prior to that, I was just okay, finding my footing. Who am I as an author? What kind of stories that I want to write? What is my brand as an author? But 2023, I was okay, I kind of have a grasp on who I am and what I want to do. So now I want to not question it, but challenge it. And I had never done an anthology before, let alone one with so many people. Definitely not one that was leaning on the darker side of things. But I was I had a couple of ideas for it that I was this would actually really fit, hopefully, with the collection and with what you guys at the time, I didn't know you guys. I was hopefully they like it. And so I was over here panicking and rewriting and is this good? You guys, let me know. So that was an experience that I definitely wanted. But so that kind of led to what I'm doing now. And then also just, creativity in general, you always have ideas and they're always coming, flowing. We were just literally talking about finding that inspiration in real life, mm-hmm. and letting it feed what you do creatively. So it's kind of what if, and then it kind of just takes off. I hope that answered the question. The way my short-term memory is set up.
Yeah.
Sometimes I forget the second half of questions.
I understand. I always get lost. And I also think when you're more introverted, your brain is okay, I'm gonna keep, talking. I'm gonna keep this energy, and then suddenly it'll panic for a second.
Yep.
Your story is called Burn, and
yes.
I have to say, I am so glad that it is in here, because I am a witchy person. My first book is A Time When Demons, and my main character is a witch. So it's so up my alley. So for me, this was a personal one that when you sent it in, I was oh yes, this is it. And definitely some girls in there who are not that nice. And
yes.
Do you want to tell us a little bit about the story without giving spoilers?
Okay, so without giving spoilers, Burn is a story about a girl who is, she's in her senior year of, we'll call it boarding school. It's not really boarding school, but senior year, getting ready to graduate. And, she's got her friends and they've been through thick and thin together. And they're like, okay, we're about to go into this next phase of our lives. But it's kind of like that reality that you feel at the end of high school when you're like, okay, I'm not a child anymore. Like I'm really about to like go and be an adult, and there are going to be different expectations. There's not going to be any more, we'll say grace, if you mess up, your consequences have a lot more weight. And so going into that, they get into like this little dare or whatever, and it just kind of escalates from there. And I will say that, everybody doesn't make it out alive. And yeah, you kind of have that idea of, especially with like girls, that female friendship aspect of like, are we really, really friends, or is it like proximity? And so we're forced to be friends. I have fun writing it. It is also the origin story for a character that's going to be in another series that I'm writing. So hopefully you guys get it. You like it. You enjoy it. If you like it, there's going to be more of that, of a particular character in a kind of like a cameo type thing in another series. So
oh, that's great to hear, because I was going to ask. There are a few stories in the collection where you can, and I've said this before, like one of my favorite kinds of short story is that kind where you're just sort of put into this world and you are left wondering, okay, but what led up to this and what's going to come after? So hearing that there is going to be more of that is very exciting for me. And I think that anyone else who reads this is going to think the same thing.
I hope so. I'm very much on your, like, I agree with what you're saying, because it's like, I don't know, with fantasy for sure, but like with any story, I love feeling like the world is bigger than just what we're following. And it's just like, okay, we have this moment, we have this character, but the world is still revolving. It's still happening outside of this one little slice of it that we're getting. So I'm very happy to know that my story does that.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. It was very successful.
Thanks.
You have a YouTube channel, as we touched on, and you're more in the author tube direction. I know that we have some people who are, a bit more booktube, sort of all over the place. So in your, author channel, what themes or topics do you generally explore, and do they relate at all to the piece that you wrote here, or are they sort of outside of that genre or realm?
That's a good question. I mean, for me, it kind of covers like all of it, because the author content that I cover is very much like just like what I'm experiencing and what I've learned as an author. Because when I started my channel, I tried to be a booktube girly. I did. I tried really hard. It didn't work out because I don't read enough books to be a booktube girly.
It's like me.
And so I was like, and then so after several reevaluations later, I was just like, on my channel, the thing that I was craving, the content I was craving in the beginning, especially, was like, okay, but how do I do this? Like, how do I be an indie author? Like, how do I put these books out? Like, how do I go about this process? So a lot of my author content is geared towards that. Like, oh, this is how you get ARC readers. Like, this is how you do beta reading. But also, I have a very, very inconsistent, but it's there, vlog section of my channel where it's just like, this is what I'm going through in the process of my writing. Because especially once your book is out, people see the finished product and they're like, oh, it must be so easy. And it's just like, no. here's the process. Here is where I was at 6 months ago when I was like stressed and like crying because I'm like, I don't know what to do. It's like, it's worth it in the end. But for everyone, no matter how many times you've done it, no matter how refined your process gets, it's like everybody has ups and downs. And that's one of the things that I always try to advocate for on my channel, is especially as an indie author, like everybody's journey is a journey, right? But especially for indie authors, it's like you have to learn how to roll with the punches. It's like, and I always tell like my mentoring clients, like, hey, like the bad thing that you're afraid of, it's going to happen. The important thing is that you're prepared for it and roll with the punches.
Exactly. I think, especially when you are putting out stuff in a fantasy genre, it's such a a fun thing to read that people who are reading and aspiring writers are thinking, yeah, well, it's just fun to write. Like, this is so fun, and it comes off all polished. It's like, yeah, but there's blood, sweat, and tears that go into that polished final product,
Yes.
and it's a good thing to go through. You have to do that. You have to go through some stress to create something that you really love. I think that applies to pretty much everything. And I think it's a good thing to show that, because there is a lot of stuff online with this sort of polished image of a certain lifestyle or a certain career and things like that, you know, like rise and grind and all the girl boss stuff. It's like, yeah,
Yes.
but what you see at the end and those like polished pictures, there's so much behind that, and proving that everyone is human is important.
Absolutely. I mean, it's very easy to get caught up in the aesthetic, especially going forward. I don't know what's happening in this 2020 timeline, but it's just kind of like, I feel like it's this idea that like you have to have accomplished every single one of your dreams before you hit 30.
Yeah.
And it's just kind of like, I don't know who told you that you were not old at 30. Like, admitting that, right?
Yeah.
But also, you're never too late to start, and you're never too late to get better at what you do. And the aesthetic of like, oh, I get up and then I make coffee, then I sit in my lovely second story window with the sunshine pouring in, and I type all day, and you know, I record
on my perfectly organized desk with the little flowers.
Yeah, it's like, for sure that reality does exist, but for a lot of people, I'm not gonna say most, for a lot of people, it's, oh God, I have to write this entire scene, and I have rewritten it 5 times, and I don't know what I'm going to do, but like, I need to get it done because I already booked my editor for like 3 weeks from now, and it needs to be done. Otherwise, I'm going to have to wait another 6 months to get an appointment with them. And it's just kind of like, you know, it's more like, what is it? It's sweatpants, hair tied kind of day.
Yeah.
You know, it's not like not always glamorous.
For the next 48 hours, I am going to be wearing pajamas and trying to remember to eat food that actually has nutrition in it.
Exactly. Like, water, what is that? I mean, I think I've had some in the last 72 hours.
It's like, why do I have such a headache? Oh yeah, I'm completely dehydrated.
Yeah. Trying to create, and I'm like, haven't fed myself, haven't gotten any water, haven't gotten up out of this chair in like 3 days. Yeah. And so I feel like it's important to know that, like, I don't know, it's like that for everyone, you know, especially if you're in the beginning of the journey and you're like, oh, but you know, this person has so many books, and oh man, but I can tell you right now, I've talked to a lot of authors, some who have like 50 plus books, and some who are like on their second book. Everybody is the same.
And that's such a good point too that you made about the accomplishments before, you know, before you're 30. I remember when I was younger, I thought I'd had to publish a book before I was 18 because I remember, who was it? There was this author, I think it was the author of the like Aragon series, who was this, you know, prodigy in the fantasy world, and I think they were published at like 16 or 17. So in my little overachiever brain, I was like, well, if I don't have a book out by 18, I'm done for.
Right. No, like that makes perfect sense.
Yeah. Because there's always someone you're going to look at who is doing better than you in some way. And like that's always going to be there. So you have to just keep sort of reality in mind and think about your own benchmarks, your own goals, and your own accomplishments, because it has to be personal. And also that person who's doing better than you in some way is probably doing worse than you in other ways. It's, you know, there's no one out there who's the perfect writer.
Right. And it's such a balancing act. And it's also important to remember that, like, you know, because literally, like when you said that, I went to a book festival over this past weekend, and there was an author there, and he's 15 and he already has 3 books out. Yeah. And I was just like, okay, do your thing, young man. But also, it's just kind of like, I think it's important to remember, especially depending on, you know, what area you are, millennial. But it's just kind of like, you know, growing up with Gen X parents, they were not on that creative support type thing. They were like, get a practical job. Creating and writing is like a hobby. So it's kind of different in the era that you grow up too, because it's like now when kids have books out, it's like, okay, well, self-publishing is a thing, and a lot of creative outlets are like viable for a lot more people, and that support is there, and everybody's support system looks different. And some people also have to keep in mind that, you know, when people are doing things when they were young, a lot of times with the things that you do when you're young, you're just kind of testing the waters.
Yeah.
Versus once you're older and you've lived and you've thought about it and you've got that life experience to pull from, the stories that you can tell are inherently just going to be different, and no one can tell your story outside of you. So it's just kind of like, I don't know. I believe everything happens for a reason. So it's like, if you didn't publish that book when you were 18, that means that you needed to live a little bit longer before you could publish the book, you know? So when it does come out, when you're, I don't know, 28, 45, 82, whatever, you know, it's what it needed to be. Like, you've lived the life that you needed to live in order to get to the point that you're at, to do what it is that you wanted to do. As long as you don't let it slip by, I think that's the important thing. I did not mean to be soap opera about that.
Oh, no, it's great. I love it. But yeah, I think it's also important that everything you're doing, every bit of work you're doing towards publishing, even if you haven't done it yet, that's going towards that. Like, you are actively doing things towards that publication and that goal. And also remember that, like, people have to remember that once you publish, you're going to want to publish your next book. So it's not an end. You don't need to, like, okay, I did that when I was 17 and now it's done. Like, whenever you start, you're going to keep going. Like, this is going to be a lifelong thing if you're really dedicated to it, right? And
absolutely.
And also, if you're putting stuff out when you're really young, you might really regret that later. Because I was lucky in some ways that both of my parents are artists and writers. So I had a lot of creative friends who were being, you know, stomped down, whereas me, it was like, the whole family goes into fine arts. That's just a given. And because of that, I did do some like little self-publishing forays. Like, I was selling stuff at comic conventions when I was 14 years old. And now I look back at what I was doing like, oh no, oh no. And while it's good that that was going towards this higher goal and it's built me up where I am now, it's like, oh, why did you let me do that, Mom?
It's the journey.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, no, I like literally every author that I talk to, especially once they've gotten past that like very, very, very first work, they're like, oh my God, we don't talk about that. Like,
yeah, like that's
let's
over
focus
here
on the new stuff.
We're going along now.
Yeah.
So there's a lot involved in creativity, especially these days with marketing and being indie, like we both are. As a creator on YouTube and running communities and stuff, how do you balance all of the demands you have with creating videos, writing? Believe you also have a day job, all of those things.
The reality of it is, I don't like it's one of those things where I think the reality, because I like to be honest and transparent, right? Like, sometimes something drops and you just kind of have to choose what's going to be the thing to drop on any given day. Because, you know, I think when it comes to writing, especially, like, I am just now starting a part-time job. For the last couple of years, I've been a full-time writer. But like, even with all of that time, it's like, okay, you have to balance writing, you have to balance marketing, you have to balance creating content about your writing to market your writing. You know, it's a whole thing. But then you also have like a family, you also have like to rest and recuperate. And if you're an introvert, you need time by yourself. And then you also have to like experience life so that your creative well doesn't run so dry that you're like, I don't know where to go from here, you know. But there's also like learning and getting better at your craft and like networking. Like, there's so much that goes into it. So for me, it's always like, okay, I'm always going to prioritize writing as much as I can. Like, I try very hard not to drop that particular ball. But then sometimes that means, okay, marketing, some weeks, some months, I'm great. Like, I got this. We posted every other day. We got this schedule. And then the next month hits when I have not pre-planned content. And it's like, okay, sorry, you guys. Hope you enjoyed this sprint because it's not here. But for me, I think the biggest thing that I've learned is to not recreate the wheel every time. So it's like, if I'm writing, I can record that and I can make a vlog. And then it's like, okay, I'm writing and creating content at the same time. And, you know, when I post it, as long as I'm telling people about it, well, that becomes my marketing for my book, because it's like, now you're on the journey with me, you know? So it was just kind of like trying to figure out how can I use the same thing as many times
Yeah.
as possible before I have to move on. But yeah, well, what about you? Because you have so many of the same things as well.
Similar. I this this last year I think has been the probably the busiest year of my life. The year prior was a bit more manageable. There's just been a lot of changes. So I mean, starting Stygian, and
Mhm,
I had 8 months leading up to that where I wasn't working a day job because
mhm,
I got rolled into some layoffs, and it was good because we got a bit of a payout and I got to
mhm.
go on, EI and stuff like that. So I had 8 months, but then I was looking for a job the whole time because I knew it couldn't last forever. So
Right.
I started a new job this year, launched Stygian. My partner and I are living together. That's new for me. I hadn't been in a relationship at all for years and years and years, let alone like living with someone. I'm very introverted on my own. Probably didn't think I was even going to do that. So there's those adjustments. Um, so like the personal life, the professional life, author, and yeah, I think I survived with a lot of spreadsheets. um, a lot of different ways to keep track of tasks and probably a little bit like obsessive and mental about it because I'll put the same thing in multiple places. So
Mhm.
I'll have my monthly calendar printed out, my calendar on my computer, and then I'll have a weekly calendar printed out, and then I'll have
Yeah.
sticky notes all over my computer monitor. And I also run a sort of part-time cat sitting business, so that's also
Ooh.
in there too. Like it is too much, and I fully understand it, but I love doing all of those things. So I think that is a big driving factor, as I'm sure is the same for you. So there's that passion, that love, but it is important to figure out where your priorities are. Like, what are the things that absolutely need to get done? What are things that I can actually, that I can say no to if I really
Mhm.
have to, and just sort of have that running in your mind so that you don't completely burn out. And also
That part.
knowing how to delegate if you can, and knowing where your support system is if you ever need to just rant.
Hmm.
And I guess also just being very honest with everyone who you are working with and your online community. I think there were 2 or 3 months when Stygian was really getting going and we were, trying to put the anthology out. And I completely dropped my personal YouTube channel and just told people, like, if you want to see what I'm doing, follow Stygian. That's where anything I'm creating right now is. You're just going to have to wait. And then I came back when I was able to. So priorities are very important.
Absolutely. And I would also second, oh, sorry. I would also second the fact that, communication is key as well, especially when, because like writing inherently is a very isolating thing. Like you have to sit
Yeah.
down at your desk by yourself and kind of do the thing, right? But, you also want a community, you also want to be around people. And
Yeah.
part of being creative and part of marketing and part of all of that is okay, well, you have to let people know what you're doing
Yeah.
and everything else. So that communication piece, I think, is one of the things that if I could like tell anyone anything about like trying to balance everything, it's just like tell people where your boundaries are, and not
Mhm.
necessarily just boundaries like, oh, you're not going to do this to me, but like boundaries like, okay, I can't do this, I have to
Yeah.
have time to like get away from my computer, I have to have time for myself, I have to have time where I'm not available to you.
Yeah.
That's something that I had to learn. It was a very hard lesson in the beginning because I just wanted to be everywhere and I wanted to do it everything, because kind of like you said, like, when you're able to do what you enjoy doing, it doesn't feel like work.
Hmm.
And so you always feel like you can take on more. And it's like when you love it, you're having fun. But then also you don't want to get burnt out because you're doing so much all the time that you never have room to like breathe,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, I definitely have been in that say yes to everything mode. And
Hmm.
and we have so many opportunities now, right? Like once you get out online and you're doing marketing and you're putting yourself forward, things do start coming to you. It's like, yeah, but I want to do all of them. And you
Hmm.
just sometimes you can't do all the things.
Sometimes you cannot do all the things. That is a very real sentiment. And it's just kind of like you have to know, like, I can do this and I want to do this, but
Yeah.
like, maybe not this time,
Yeah.
uh, still learning that one. It's a lesson that I'm learning in real time.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. I have to drop a couple things coming up and it's going to be very difficult. And I'm trying to, do it in a way that doesn't affect anyone too much, like, finding replacements for myself and stuff like that before I even
mhm,
bring anything up, just to be like, here, this is an easy transition. I can't do this anymore. I'm actively
literally that.
working on that. It's hard.
It is. And I will also say that if you're listening to this and you're like, okay, but I have already overcommitted,
Mm,
I would say the best thing to do is to tell people as soon as possible when you
yeah.
realize that you can't deliver on something, instead of trying to and then
Hmm.
failing and then leaving the people high and dry regardless. Tell
Yeah.
them. And then also, kind of like what you just mentioned, Holly, of like, if you know someone who can, help fill the space, help fill the gap, reach out to them and be like, hey, I can't do this. Sorry. But, this person has already been prepped on how to like take my place because they have time. Here you go,
Exactly.
silver platter.
Yeah. Yeah. That helps. Like I think having that replacement or something, so you're never just either ghosting
Mhm.
or going, all right, I'm out, and leaving people with nothing, because that's the least professional thing you can do.
Yes. And I will say that one of the things that I've learned recently and have been trying to impart into one of my mentees that I
Mm,
work with is that, like, even though we are, somewhat of a large community, because like everybody has their own little bubble, I'll
mhm.
say, that they kind of function within. It's like there is a certain level of professionalism that I feel like you have to remember to keep in mind, even though you're at home and you're behind your desk, and everybody's kind of doing their own thing. It's just kind of like, it's not a necessarily corporate setting, but there is a certain level of professionalism that you do want to keep about yourself
Mhm.
when you're like going into, especially if you want more opportunities.
Yeah.
It's like, if you're easy to work with, makes it a lot easier to reach out to you and be like, hey, I can tap you on your shoulder for this. But reputation and professionalism and things like that do still matter in
Oh yeah.
2023 on the internet. Just throwing that out there in case
And
anybody need to hear it.
word does get around in creative communities.
Absolutely.
Oh.
Especially like projects.
Mhm.
People will absolutely ask their other author friends, do you know anything about so and so?
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
if it's not positive, you will never get that tap on the shoulder.
Yeah, reputation is important. I remember when I was running events, and the worst thing that would happen was when someone would say, yeah, I really want to do, it was like live modeling art events.
Mhm.
Oh, I really want to model for you. I'm so excited. And then a week before the event, they would completely ghost me. It's like,
Mhm.
just tell me you can't. That's fine. I get maybe it's uncomfortable, but just say I can't.
Right.
Like, even if it's a negative thing, it means the world just to hear it.
Communication is key.
Yeah,
Like, just
exactly.
say what you mean what you say, and it's okay to change your mind. Just let people know in enough time to like make adjustments, because the
Mhm.
thing that makes people upset isn't that you can't do the thing. It's when you can't do the thing and you tell them at the last minute and now they don't have time to make up for the absence.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Talking about community, how have you felt being a part of an anthology that features the works of other, specifically YouTube-based creators?
Honestly, I love it because, okay, for me specifically, right? Introvert. I get so nervous like commenting on other people's videos when I don't know
Mhm.
them. So being in an anthology with other author tubers and other YouTubers, like in general, it's like, oh, now I have other people and I know them. Like, even if it's just like a moment, like when we had our group chats, it's
Yeah.
like, I've seen you, I've talked to you, you're not a stranger anymore. So now it's like, I don't feel weird if I like watch your videos en masse or comment
Mhm.
beneath them. It's not like, oh, I'm the weird stalker chick who just showed up on your channel, don't know why I couldn't talk. But it's like, okay, I feel like the community has expanded, even if we write in different genres or we write different types of things. Because I know some of us, we write poetry goes over my head. I'm not gonna lie, I'm not gonna front. I am not that high level intellectual, unfortunately, but also I can appreciate it and be like, okay, I see you doing your thing, and I'm like rooting for you from like the quiet sidelines.
Yeah.
I think about it like when you go to a play, you have some people in the audience who are like, wow, and they're, doing the whistle and they're clapping and they're super loud. But you have other people who are just like quietly there and they show up to every show and they're like, you're not necessarily loud, but it's like, I'm here. I see you. I'm supporting. I'm here for it. That's me.
I love it. And I'm glad to have opened that up a bit because I relate to that for sure. And I think all of us, especially in the AuthorTube era, I think the booktubers are a little more outgoing just from what I've seen. Maybe not, but just the way sort of I observe it, the booktube community is more like they connect more. And I think with AuthorTube, we're all a little bit like, oh, can I talk? I don't know. So, I wanted to be able to put some people together a little bit.
I definitely appreciate it. I feel like with booktube it's a little different because it's just like, when you read a book that you really love, you're like, oh my god, you love that book too, and then it's like immediately friends. Whereas with AuthorTube it's a little bit different because you're like, I have this book and it's like my soul on the page and I want to show it to you, but if you don't like it, it's really gonna hurt my feelings. Can you be nice?
Yeah, you're talking about something extremely personal, whereas booktube it's like, okay, maybe you love it or you hate it, but you didn't write it.
But you didn't write it and you don't know the person who did most of the time, so you're just like, the critiques and the discussion, like people get very casual, like, oh my god, I hated that book. Oh my god, did you? I'm never sending you my book. I can't handle it.
Yeah, exactly. How does the act of writing a short story, and I bring this up because I watched your video about the writing process here. And so, I mean, I've seen it, but I'm sure not everyone watching has. So how does the act of writing a short story for a publication like this differ from your usual long form writing projects, and what sort of unique challenges and rewards came up throughout?
I'm gonna be honest with you, writing a short story was absolutely miserable. And I was just like, I went into it thinking like, oh, I can write like 100,000 plus word novel. Surely I can write like a scene. It's only like
That's how I felt about it.
3 to 5,000 words.
Yeah.
This should be easy. It was not. Mostly the biggest challenge for me was, when you have a full-length novel, you have time to get through all the points. So like, but when you have a short story, it's like you have to whittle it down to like bare minimum. What does the story need to make sense, to be cohesive, and to move it along? And it is a very, very special skill that I would equate it to the difference between like a home cook, right, who's really good, versus someone who has spent time on Hell's Kitchen with Gordon Ramsay.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a great comparison.
It's like when you're with Gordon Ramsay in the kitchen, it's like you got to be moving fast. You have to get everything. You have to have a full understanding of everything that's happening. And you have to be able to pick and choose, this is what needs to be done right this second, and like keep it moving. Right. Whereas when you're at home, you can take your time, you can read the recipe, you can look up some stuff online, you have time to kind of mosey. Short stories, no. And then also the challenge for me was that even though like I like short stories, I've never read like a whole anthology like fully before. And so I was like, before I get started on this, I was like, let me actually do some research so I know what I'm talking about. And so that was one of the, I guess, the wins in a way, because it kind of expanded what I was familiar with, in the sense of I was reading more anthologies, I was reading more stories, reading more authors. And, as an author, when you read stories, you are also inherently improving your craft.
Yeah.
So there was that. And then also it was fun. It was, like I said, it was a unique challenge. And it was something where I was just like, okay, I want to see if I can do this. I know I can do this, but I want to see how I'm going to do this. And then also with the elements of fantasy, because disclaimer, even though it is, darker society for the Stygian Collection, it is still very much fantasy, because that's the world that I live in. That's what I like. And so trying to figure out, how do I incorporate the amount of world building that I need to make this make sense without overwhelming it, and like having that take the place of the story, and then also like dialogue and moving it along. And it was a lot. It's a lot. Overall though, I think I would do it again. knowing what I know now, it was such a good experience, especially being able to like see everyone else's stories and the finished product as well, and kind of how my story fit into the scheme of things and the whole book and the whole collection. And it's just kind of like, wow, we really did this. Like this is really cool. Especially, you know, being able to see everyone else's stories, and like it's the idea of like, if you give two writers the same idea, they're going to come up with something completely different.
Mm.
And just kind of seeing it all come together, it's like, wow, this is pretty dope. This is amazing.
That was one of the things that excited me the most when we had our final selection of stories. And I was thinking like, okay, I love all of these. How are they going to work together? And when we had that night where we printed everything out and put them all out on the floor and moved them around because we just wanted to have that physical representation in front of us. And once we figured out that whole order and they all came together as sort of a cohesive unit, it was like, oh, this is even more special than I thought at first. Because yeah, you have the same general prompt, but everyone is so different and explores these very different elements of the human psyche. And you know, even if you are in a fantasy world or in a futuristic world, it's such a, I mean, great collection, if I do say so myself, as the person who put it together. But I'm so glad you were able to tackle the short story, because I personally tried to and gave up halfway through. So when I was watching your YouTube video, I was like, yep. Yep. Because I sat down and there was a certain point where I just went, I'm not gonna have the energy to do this and you know, curate the whole book and put it together. So I just went into my poetry archive and I was like, here's a couple poems, this is good. But hopefully one day I can have the same experience as you did, because I think it would be massively rewarding to conquer it, because short stories are tough.
They are. I will say this, for me, one of the like biggest turning points was when I started it. Like I said, I knew what a short story was, but I hadn't really read a short story since like college.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just like I was working from a very thin like pull base, I'll say. So I was like, okay, I have anthologies on my shelf that I purchased to like support authors,
Mm-hmm.
but I never actually cracked them open. And I had two of them that were really like influential for me. One was A Phoenix First Must Burn, which is edited by Patrice Caldwell. And it came out in 2019, 2020. And it's all, you know, fantasy. It's all like different types of fantasy. Some of it's historical, some of it's futuristic. And I was just like, oh, this is what it means to have an idea and for everyone to tackle it a different way. And
Mm-hmm.
then after that I read Africa Risen, which I'm still working my way through. And then that also just kind of like slammed into me because, you know, with A Phoenix First Must Burn, that's young adult. So the writing style is very different, but reading adult short stories, it's like, oh, it's kind of it's so crazy.
Mm.
This is no shade to anyone, but it's kind of like when you read someone who's in high school who's really good at what they do,
Yeah.
but then you meet a professional who does the same thing and you're like, oh, this is on a completely different level.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of getting like being able to add to the creative wall to pull from is like, oh, this is what it looks like. This is how this author did it. This is how they started it. This is how they ended it. This is where they left it without closing off the world and making it feel like, oh, this is like the story just stopped here. Like, no, the world is still there, but this is where the story with this particular character stops. And it was just interesting. That's what I say, it was an experience that I'm glad that I had, because I feel like it added something to my writing that I don't think I would have been able to add on my own. But also, I don't think I'm going to be doing it again anytime soon. Like, I'm not about to be like, ooh, I'm coming out with a short story collection, you guys. Yeah. Absolutely not.
Yeah. Sometime in the future.
Never. Like, I might submit to like another anthology,
Mm-hmm.
but I will never be like, you know what I did? I wrote essentially an entire book's worth of short stories.
Yeah.
I did not.
Well, I'm really glad that I was able to help with some constructive creative process, even if it was painful.
Yeah.
And thank you for the mentions of those books too, because I want to look into them. Because I mean, we wanted to put out an anthology, but I'm also someone who, like, I read collections in university and really have not done much since. And Corey, one of our other authors, she suggested if you are interested in the more sort of sci-fi area, I think she had said Ray Bradbury had like a massive collection of short stories that she had recommended, and that's one I want to look into as well. So yeah, you have to read it to know how to write it, and I think you and I probably both read epics. And that's what I know how to write. I know how to write something that's going to be like 300,000 words long.
That part, it's just like, I can give you length, I can give you time, I can give you, oh, you're going to be here reading the same book for like a week.
Yeah.
Glad we agreed on that. You can settle in. I will say this, there is one anthology collection that I have. It's by N.K. Jemisin. It's How Long Until Black Future Month. And that one was a little bit different only because it's all by the same author. And I was just like, oh, okay. Huh. Never doing this, but I can see what you did here.
I'll have to look that one up as well. I'm getting such a great reading list out of these interviews.
I love that for you.
Yeah. So we are sort of coming to the end of our interview time, but I mean, I could keep talking to you about this stuff forever. I think we have a lot in common. We do similar writing and have had some similar experiences, and I'm sure we will talk more in the future. I hope so.
Absolutely.
But before we do wrap it up, I of course want to give you your platform to say whatever you want. Let us know what you are working on next. Direct us to your channel, your communities, your website, whatever you like.
Awesome. Okay. So first things first, because short-term memory and the way it's set up. Thing that I'm working on currently, it is at large called Project Necromancer, and it's a story about a necromancer who wants to take over the world, essentially.
Excellent.
It is going to be my next series that I am working on. I am taking a break after I write the first book in this new series. I'm going to write the third book of the Wrath of the Gods trilogy, and that will be the last. And I'm really excited about it. Have already started talking to my cover artist about what the cover is going to be, and it is actually outlined, even though I'm very much a pantser. I actually know what's going to happen in it. So those are the two projects that are kind of lined up for me right now. As far as my platforms, definitely check out the YouTube channel. That is kind of, like I said, juggling things. That is kind of my focus as of right now. I post videos. I don't have a schedule, but I do post videos kind of regularly. We do have the Melanin Chat, which is a live show that me and my co-host Audra Russell do every other Tuesday. And we just kind of get on it and we talk about the crazy things that are happening in the booktube community and the bookish community at large on Twitter, TikTok. And also, like, as authors, give advice, experiences, things like that, talk with the chat, answer questions, all that good stuff. So that's every other Tuesday. I also host writing sprints on Thursdays, although I'm kind of on a hiatus right now because I have been doing a lot of promotion for my recent release, We Are Dying Gods, which came out August 29th. So it's been out for going on 3 weeks. So I've been doing a lot of promotion for that. So no writing sprint at the moment, but I will be going back to that. Definitely sometime in November for NaNoWriMo. But right now, taking a break. And if you want to see me on the internet, I am at C as in Chelsea, Lockhart as in my last name, Write, WRITE. Everywhere on the interwebs. I am most active on TikTok and Twitter because I refuse to call it X. And
I agree.
I am on Instagram, but if you're trying to actually talk to me, I recommend that you get at me on TikTok or Twitter. But yeah, I think I also have a podcast if you're into that. If you're like, oh, I just like want to listen. It's called the Written Melanin Podcast. It comes out every other Tuesday and every other Wednesday. Every other Wednesday. And it's all author advice. I am talking about like my journey as an indie author and kind of tips and tricks. So like navigating Ingram Spark, KDP, ARC readers, beta readers, feedback, like from top to bottom, marketing, from writing to every stage of the process. I also have other authors on the platform to share their journeys. They're traditionally published authors. I recently had Alima Oda Amatoni on, who wrote Everyone's Thinking It. I've had the chance to speak to Elle Penelope and to Joya Goffney, Christina Forrest, people like that. But I also have a lot of indie authors come on as well, like Amanda Ross, Jessica Cage. So it's a widespread for sure.
Amazing.
Check it out if you're into that.
And I feel bad because I had just talked to Hananya and said, oh, I think you're the only one of us who has a podcast, but you do have one. And I was like, Chelsea does so much.
Yeah, a lot of hats.
Yeah, so I will have to follow your podcast because I'm trying to get into more podcasts, especially writer ones. And I will, and I'm going to follow up with you, of course, to get all of your links so that I can list them in the description down below, so that that everyone can click on them easily, and hopefully they follow all of your projects and various things you're working on.
Yeah.
I'm very excited to follow myself, and I also still need to get a hold of your books because I know that I'm going to love them.
I hope you do. See cmlockhart.com. That is me. It's just literally my name.com. So if you guys ever forget, everything will that is, what is it? The fork in the road. It will lead you to everywhere you need to go.
Perfect. All right. Well,
Yeah.
thank you so much for joining me this evening. It's been a really great chat. And thank you for being a part of the anthology.
Thank you for inviting me. When I got that email, being like, hey, we saw your YouTube channel, we'd like to invite you. I'm like, me? So I'm really, really honored and grateful to have been a part of it, to be a part of this community. Very introverted, so I'm not as vocal as I probably should be, but I am definitely, I see, and I am very grateful to be a part of it. So thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. So happy to have you. And I hope we will, even though we are both introverted, I'm sure we will stay in touch as time goes on. And I'm excited to follow everything you do.
Thank you.
Talk to you later.
All right.